We talk about biological world or the biosystem. It is spectacular and it is amazing. There is no doubt that there is no replacement or there is no way that we can even imagine of creating something like this, right? So, how do we understand biodiversity? The biodiversity could be understood either by data or by realization. So, I know that the data is boring. Like if I tell that there are around 3,000 species of prawn in the Western Ghats, okay, and then if I talk about, okay, there are around 1 million species of plant in Amazon, okay, and the if I keep on giving you numbers, it might bore you, but all you have to do is don't imagine the number, imagine the variety. So if you just imagine the variety, then you will understand, okay, that we are talking something very interesting here. If you look at the current state or scenario of our planet Earth and how the life is being treated on the planet Earth, it is very disturbing. So if you see in one aspect where the humans use animals such as cow, chicken, or fish, okay, for its consumption, in US alone, around 50 trillion animals are killed in a year for only the consumption of food alone, apart from other purposes. Okay, so imagine the global consumption of or dependency on animals. Now we know that the markets have increased for the trade of wild animals and the parts of wild animals. People sport on wild animals for hunting, canned hunting, we call it as. And there is lot of illegal fishing and illegal methods of fishing where it is destroying our coral life. And we are industrializing fishing for several years. So that has led to the zones in the oceans where they are declared as dead zones, where there is no fish and life. Can you believe it? So, if you look at all these disturbing things that is happening around us, you feel hopeless as a biologist because it's the huge force you're fighting. That is the human greed that you're fighting, and you don't get to any conclusions on how significantly we can preserve or protect this nature. The deforestation is happening at an exponential rate, and we are losing a lot of habitat. Our climate is changing, the global warming is happening, and the population is increasing, leading to urbanization, and it becomes lesser and lesser and lesser each day. And it is estimated that by 2030, we will lose around 80% of the biodiversity on our planet. So it is very, very sad to even imagine that, where you have the absence of an animal in the environment just because of human activities. Now imagine that you have a tiger as a favorite animal and imagine that it goes extinct and you can never get to see a tiger alive in your life or in any lives that is come further. Is it okay? It's not okay, isn't it? So biodiversity is a huge question mark. Why? Because why so much variety? Why do we need so much variety in one small species? Ants, 2,000 varieties of ants. Why? Why do we need 30,000 varieties of species? Why do we need 20,000 varieties of orchids? Okay. So when we question this, why? So we come across another question: how? Why and how? How is it even possible to create so much variety, such balance, such perfection? You don't see mistakes happening in nature. You see perfections happening in nature. Each organism is unique. Each organism has its own character, and it is so defined, right? Is it God created everything like this, or how the evolution happened, or how much time it took for this diversity to come to existence? It's not one simple question to just define. Okay, biodiversity is this richness of different species living in a community is called as biodiversity. No, it's not that easy. It is very related topic. Okay, so now coming to the outline of this chapter. In this chapter, we'll be talking about biodiversity and levels of biodiversity, patterns of biodiversity, importance, loss of biodiversity, and conservation. Okay, so let's begin. So to start with defining biodiversity, biodiversity is nothing. Bio means life, diversity means variety. Okay. So the diversity of biological organizations, okay, ranging from cellular, macromolecular to biomes to large extent. All these varieties come under biodiversity. So Edward Wilson, okay, he's a sociobiologist. So he gives a term called as biodiversity. Okay, so uh, when you look at this variety, you just really go gaga, and then you'll be like, are we really just ruining everything? Of course, yes. Anyways, so when we talk about biodiversity, we can see diversity in the living system. If we take all the living organisms, we can see this entire diversity. Uh, See, the biodiversity is a big umbrella. So below this big umbrella of biodiversity, we can understand that you can see diversity in three levels. One is ecosystem diversity, then you have species diversity, and then you have genetic diversity. So these are the three important branches of biodiversity. Okay. Now let us understand each of them. When I talk about genetic diversity, so genetic diversity is shown by a single species. So we talk about one species and you look at its varieties or differences in its genetic expression. For example, we have Revolfia, okay, vomitoria, so which is a Himalayan herb, which is treated for, which is taken for the Ayurvedic treatments. So basically, what it does is, as the altitude it grows, okay, changes, its potency also changes. Okay, so this potency changes with respect to that of the altitude. So that is one of the examples, like how the gene expressions or how the genetic itself is varying from one geographical area to another geographical area of a same species in one region, that is Himalayan region. So that chemical potency is called as raspine. So this raspine is actually, uh, raspine is usually used as medicine, and its potency decreases as we go at the altitude. Another example is the kernel of the corn. So the kernel clubs of the corn or maize, what you call it as, so the color changes. You see, you have varieties of them. Sometimes we see only yellow, sometimes we see white, sometimes you can see there's multiple colors here. So here also there is a lot of genetic diversity here, because it is not one gene, it is multiple genes, okay, varieties of genes that is expressing this character. So in one species, if you have more variety, that is called as genetic diversity. Okay. Next one is the example of our country. In our country, we have around 50,000 varieties of rice, and then we have 1,000 varieties of mango. Okay, so that is very brilliant example for understanding genetic diversity, right? You might have understood the two very easy examples: the rice varieties of rice, and then mango. Okay, next one is species diversity. So when we talk about species diversity, we cannot ignore our Western Ghats. So our Western Ghats, okay, which sits in the borders of Goa, Maharashtra, Karnataka, and then we have Andhra, Tamil Nadu. Okay, so in all these regions, if you, oh, sorry, not Andhra, Tamil Nadu. So if you look at this, Western Ghats are a very important and very rich biodiverse place. Okay, it's a very rich ecosystem. It's a very deep forest. One of the major component of our Western Ghats is amphibian population. Okay, we have a very great amphibian population compared to that of Eastern Ghats, and amphibians are like the key species. Okay, it's a very key species to for the enrichment of ecosystem and preservation of biodiversity in our Western Ghats. Here, if you see the amphibians, it is estimated around 3,000 varieties of frogs are present in Western Ghats alone, which is the highest in the world. Okay, so that is species diversity. And next one is ecological diversity. Again, our country is a brilliant example. If you go to your north, you get Himalayan belt, you have deserts, okay, and then you have shrubby areas, and then you come down, you get the tropical forest, and you have a deep tropical forest, and then you have coral reefs, you have lots of rivers, okay, which are running in our country, and you have mangrove forests, okay, and then we also have lots of wetlands, marsh and meadows. So all these give a variety of environments for a lot of life to enrich themselves. That is why our country contributes to a very highest extent coming to the global uh, biodiversity. If you take 100% of global biodiversity, India contributes more than one fourth of it because of what we have. We are gifted with beautiful ecological diversity. That means we have lots of landscapes, lots of different environments, lot of different climatic conditions. Okay, a lot of different local environments that has enriched species diversity. So another component is ecological level diversity. Example is India: deserts, rainforest, mangroves, coral reefs, wetlands, estuaries, alpines, meadows, etc. Okay, so these three, which are those? One is species diversity, genetic diversity, and then we have ecological diversity, the three components of our biodiversity. Okay. Now, coming to the estimate of your global biodiversity, like how many animals do we have across the globe? So this question is very, very hard to answer. In 2004, there was a survey conducted by IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Natural Resources. So they conducted the survey in 2004, and they gave a report telling that there are around 1.5 million species which are described. I mean, we have discovered them, understood them, and described them. Around 1.5 million species, that is around 10 lakh 50,000 species, have been described. Okay, so, and then Robert May, he has given a report and he has estimated around 7 million species would be there on the planet Earth. Okay. And usually, more of the species, he also says that more of the species are concentrated on the tropical areas, around 22% of them. Okay. Which are recorded are from the tropical area. And he also says that there are more species in the tropical areas compared to any other areas. Now, when we talk about Robert May, why do we consider Robert May? Is because now when you look at the diversity, it is a very big, as I told you, the living or biological world is a very big world. So when you look at the diversity of the species, you just can't come with number. And he has estimated with his survey that it's around 7 million. Okay. Now, other estimates, like if you look at the total number of species on Earth, very interesting question. Now you can ask me how many species of organisms are present on Earth. So we have discovered that out of all the diversity, animals are very diverse compared to that of the plant species. So animals are 70% diverse, and then you have plants and fungi, they are around 22% diverse. Rest of them are other organisms. So if you look at animals, why animals are more diverse is because a large portion of the animal diversity is occupied by insects population. Insects are crazy. You know, like if insects were to rule the world, they could rule today because their population is tremendously high. Can you believe how many ants, just ants alone we have, and then termites, and then you can go on and on and on. There are millions of species of insects are yet to be discovered, which is a very, very big kingdom. I mean, like it's a very, very big group to understand. So that is why invertebrates contribute a lot of their population in their species diversity in animals. Okay, so we have majority of them are invertebrates. Understood. Now, coming to see, around 70% of the species richness is given by insects, and out of that 10 animals, you can see that 7 are insects. Those are the numbers. Okay, those are different numbers of insects we have. Next one, other species is fungal species, very important species. Okay, so now you know that fungi are very, very diverse, and they are a combined combination of totals, fishes, amphibians, and reptiles and mammals. So if we combine the total number of discovered fishes, amphibians, reptiles, and mammals, fungi alone have so much of diversity within them. Okay, fungi is a very, very significant organism even in our biodiversity. Okay, very, very important organism, fungi. Okay, now coming to our animal diversity, we have again vertebrates and vertebrates. In invertebrates, insects are more, and then mollusks and other group animals share similarity. And then we have crustaceans. Okay, and the crustaceans are very, very less. Now coming to vertebrates, majority of the vertebrate diversity is with the fishes. The fishes are half of the species diversity, and then you have mammals, and then amphibians share similar numbers. Birds and reptiles have the similar diversity. In plant species, majority of the diversity is by angiosperms and fungi, so they share the most quadrants, whereas the ferns, mosses, and others, they share a very little bit of diversity and joined with algae and lichen. Okay, now coming to our country, like our country is very, very significant with respect to having the numbers for biodiversity. Around 2.4% of the land area in the world's 100% of land area is by India. Okay, only India covers 2.4% of the land mass in the world. Even that, we contribute to 8.1% of the species diversity. Yeah, I told one fourth. It's actually 8.1% of the species, global species diversity. Okay, very important. Now, our country is also a very proud, okay, host for 12 mega diversity. In out of 12 mega diversity countries, India is one among them. Okay, so in our country, around 45,000 plant species are there. Okay, and we have around 90,000 species of animals. Okay, now if you look at May's global estimate, India actually will have more than 1 lakh plant species and 3 lakh animal species if it is discovered. But right now we have only 45,000 plants and the 90,000 animals to current report. But according to May's estimate, it can go up to 1 lakh to 3 lakhs. Okay, so this is our country's numbers. Next one. So we understood that okay, in global level we have this much population and these are the number of species, and then in India level we have these many. This is a contribution of our country, and we have so many biological hotspots which are very enriched with species. Okay, so now coming to your uh, microorganisms, other part of the living organisms are microbes. If you see microbes, right, you know microbes are very, very hard to classify and categorize like our conventional taxonomic tools. It's not possible. Like you can't just pick one microbe after another and understand its character because they genetically have thousands of strains. Like one E. coli bacteria can have thousands of varieties with a change in genetics. Okay, they show different characteristics. So that is why the richness of the microbiological world cannot be understood through conventional taxonomic tools. So this is a entirely whole new world that is being waited to be discovered and understood. So which is not so easy. Okay. So that is why conventional tools cannot be applied for prokaryotes. Okay. Chalo. Next one we have is to understand how the biodiversity varies, or is there a pattern for biodiversity? Yes, there is a pattern for diversity, and one of the pattern is the geographical location of the places. So that we call it as latitudinal gradients. It's very simple to understand. We already know that we have an equator, and then we have poles, and then we have areas away from the poles and near to the equator. So what happens when you move away from the equator, now the species diversity decreases. Very simple. We know why species diversity. Species diversity increases where you have a lot of resources, such as for the food, shelter, and then you have even climatic conditions. So near the equator and little bit away from the equator, very very near to the equator, there's tropics, so tropical areas. What happens is there is a proper distribution of climate. Climate is very predictable. So when the climate is predictable, it is split into seasons, which is facilitated and animals can adapt. And because they are not disturbed for a very long period of time through the evolutionary timeline, so they have got in a lot of time for the enrichment of species diversity. Now the energy, the stable climatic conditions, and then you have what do you say? You have energy and you have stable climatic conditions that is supporting them, and the time they have got for uh, you know reproducing and adapting for a very long period of time without having any consequences such as volcanoes, such as earthquakes. All this has not disturbed this tropical regions. So that's why we can find a lot of species very close to the equator or close to equator. Okay, so this change in the diversity richness according to the change in the latitude. So this is called as latitude gradient. Okay, usually the species diversity decrease from equator to poles. Okay, so now we have tropics. These range from 23.5 degree north to 23.5 degree south. This is the place where we have more species than any other areas on the planet. Okay, now coming to the latitude gradient, let us take an example. We have Colombia. Colombia is very tropical, and in very equatorial. So you can see that there are around 1400 species of birds, whereas in India we have around 1200 species of birds. Whereas in New York, which is quite north, and then Greenland, complete north, you can see that in New York it is 105 species, and in Greenland it is around 56 species. So there is a tremendous decrease in the species richness as we move up away from the equator. Okay. And another example is we have a tropical forest in Ecuador. So in Ecuador, we have around 10 times more vascular plants than any other place in a temperate region. Okay, compared to that of any Midwest USA. All right, next one. If you take about Amazon rainforest, which is a tropical rainforest, the largest in the world, which is a home for thousands of species. So here you can see the species richness in Amazon as an example. So we have more than 40,000 plants, 3,000 fishes, 1,300 birds, 427 mammals, 427 amphibians, 378 reptiles, and more than 125,000 species have been discovered in Amazon alone, and yet scientists claim that we have not even scraped 10% of Amazon to understand the invertebrate population. Insects have not even been discovered. They're estimating around a million species of insects to be present in Amazon alone. Okay, we have not discovered all of them. A very small portion of this forest have been explored because of its difficulty and treachery. It's not easy to just explore the tropical forest because it's so deep and dense. Survival is not possible or easy. Okay, to study them. Understood? Now, coming to the latitudinal gradients, why latitudinal gradients actually changes? Because as I told you, there is lot of richness of species in the biodiversity for the following reasons. First one is they had more time for the evolution. Next one is they have constant environment. And third one is we have a lot of energy source in the form of solar energy, which contributes for great productivity. Okay, and that is the reason. So we can see here, which is 23.5 degree, and here 23.5 degrees south. Okay, so this is a region we have a lot of life. So now another important area, another pattern for biodiversity is species area relationship. So when we talk about species area relationship, hold on. Are you guys understanding? Are you listening? All right. Thank you for the response. Veera Venkataraju, you're here. Nice. After a long time. Then we have Santosh and Visakhapatnam people and our Chikbalapur people. Nice. Good. Thanks for the response, guys. So let's go ahead and understand for the topics. Okay. So we have to talk about species area relationship. It's very easy to understand. So what is species area relationship? Like with the surface area, does the species diversity increases? So to understand this, we have Van Humboldt. So he's a Southern American, Alexander Van Humboldt. So he went into South American jungles, basically South American jungles at Amazon. Okay. So these regions, what they do is the species richness, as we keep on exploring, it increases, correct, right? So we let's assume that we start from one portion of our Western Ghats and we keep going deeper and deeper. What happens as we go explore more and more areas, we come across more and more new species. Now, is this never ending? Yes, it has an end. So to a limit, it will expand, and after that, it will stop. Okay, so that's what he said, and he tried to give it through. He tried to define it through a graph. So species area relationship, if it is plotted against a graph on a tropical area, okay, what we get is a rectangular hyperbola like this. Okay, we get a rectangular hyperbola, which can be derived into an equation where S is equals to Ca square, Ca to the power Z. Now, what is S and what is Ca to the power Z, we will understand. S is the species richness, and then A is the area, Z is the slope, okay, and C is the constant, okay. So that is Y intercept, we call it as, okay. Now, The same thing, if you plot it against, if you take a logarithmic plot and if you just plot it in the graph, what we get is this straight line. We get it as log s is equals to log c plus z log a. So this is the equation we acquire through a straight line. Okay. See, if I plot a graph taking a tropical environment, and then if I see how it increases, that is species area. See, as the area increases, slowly the species diversity also increases, and finally it saturates. Understood? Now, if I take a logarithmic expansion, that means it keeps on increasing. Let's say that it never ends. If it is two situations, okay, one situation we know what happens in reality. As we explore, it goes on increasing, and at one point it will stop. This upper one. So that can be represented by as s is equals to ca square, ca to the power z. Whereas when you plot it in a logarithmic scale, you get a straight line, right? So that means exponential. So as we explore more species, as we explore more species. So in this condition, we get an equation as log s is equals to log c plus log z log a, where we can see that s indicates species richness, a indicates the area, z is the slope of the line. Okay, this is a regressive coefficient. See how much it will change, how much it will decrease. Okay, so next one, c is equals to y-intercept. Okay, this c is y-intercept. That means if I intercept with y like this, so that is the y. Understood? So now, if I talk about this line, log s is equals to log c. So if I talk about this, and if I compare it to area, let us say that I'm taking an example of South India, or in a South Indian forest like Western Ghats and Eastern Ghats. If I'm taking now here, the line does not change much. That means the z value lies between 0.6 to 1.2. Okay, this is a small area. If I talk about a continental basis, okay, even in logarithmic scale, what we can see that in continental scale, if I just look from far, sorry, if I look at small areas, it will lie between 0.1 to 0.2. If I look at larger area like continents, if I compare American continent and Asian continent, what I can see that the values change from 0.6 to 1.2. So that is the slope regresses. That means it becomes steeper. So the values become more evident when we take about larger area. Understood? So this is the relationship between area and species and area relationship. Okay. One example, live example is we have frugivorous birds and mammals in the tropical forest of different countries. The value is 1.15. So if you compare countries, the value becomes 1.15. Understood? So as we go more area, the slope regresses. As we go, like smaller areas, it becomes very small. Understood? So this is about species area relationship. Now, why do we have to conserve or save biodiversity? Why biodiversity is very, very important to us? So biodiversity is important to us, and we can understand through David Tillman. So what did David Tillman understood is, so when we look at more richness in the species, so he worked in the open plots. So while he was working in the open plots, what he understood was, if there is species diversity, okay, he takes two plots. Let us say that he has two plots, plot A and plot B. In plot A, let us say we have less species diversity. You know what is species diversity? Varieties. Like you have a lion, tiger, deer, monkey. Okay, so this is a different species, right? So like that, we don't have the case in B. In B, we have higher species diversity. When there is more species diversity, what happens is the overall variation within the ecosystem is very, very less. So if you see any deep forest, you don't see that the forest is going on a tremendous amount of change. Whereas when you have very less species diversity, the, the ecosystem goes under a tremendous amount of change. If you look at the polar regions, if you look at frigid regions, what you can see is we don't have much species diversity. Here, there is a tremendous amount of change that happens in the biomass, in the way the animals react, in the way that they perform everything. So variation can be seen higher in low species rich area, whereas variation cannot be seen much in high species rich area. Understood? So this stability increases productivity. When we have high productivity, higher is the biomass, higher is the evolution, higher is the diversity. Okay. So which is very, very essential for the survival of human race. Whereas uh, loss of biodiversity equals loss of species richness. Loss of species richness equals to loss of everything. Okay. Next one. We have another beautiful way of explaining this, explaining the importance of species richness when it comes to biodiversity. We have a scientist called as Rivet Popper. So this Rivet Popper hypothesis, so it's a Rivet Popper hypothesis, and it was suggested by Paul Ehrlich. Okay, he's a Stanford ecologist. So now what Paul Ehrlich tells us is, if you look at an ecosystem, and the ecosystem contains different species. Okay, so let us say that we take an ecosystem like our forest, where we have tigers, we have deer, we have snakes, we have amphibians, and we have lots of insects. Okay, and we have elephants, and then we have birds like peacocks, etc. Right? So we have so many different animals. Now let us say that these animals are very, very significant. There was a statement that was told. They say that the loss of population in Western Ghats, tiger population in Western Ghats, the loss of tiger population in Western Ghats led to the drying of river Kaveri. Okay, so this might be a shocking statement. How can the tigers population result in the drying of Kaveri? So they were trying to explain us the significance of one keystone animal. For example, another example I'll give you. There was a statement: if sharks in the ocean are removed, then the sea dies at a very faster rate compared to that of any disaster. Why sharks have to be so important, and why removal of sharks will lead to the death of oceans very faster? Now, even though they eat other animals, why are they so important? So this relationship of animals under significance is not the same for everybody. So one animal is very, very important compared to that of other animals. Okay. So in case of oceans, when we talk about sharks, sharks are the apex predators, and they keep the control of bigger predators. They're the only source to keep the control of bigger predators so that the smaller fish population thrives in the ocean. Now imagine that knocking out the shark will give a very huge bonus to these bigger predator fishes, where they multiply very largely, eliminating all the small fishes and decreasing their breeding, thereby slowly leading to the choking or the decrease in the energy supply or the food supply. Correct? Right? It will cut off eventually. Now, similarly, when we talk about any important forest like Western Ghats, and we talk about the tiger population, and we know that the tiger population is very important to check the herbivore population in the Western Ghats. So these species are keystone species, very, very important in the ecosystem. To understand the keystone species, the importance of species diversity, Paul Eric explains in a very beautiful way. He says that imagine that all of us are flying in a plane, and while we are in the plane, what we do is we try to take off each and every bolt, or the bolts and the nuts that are, that are attaching the parts of the plane. We just take it out. Now, let us say that I take the bolt of a seat. When I take the bolt of a seat, the seat gets affected, not the entire plane. Correct, right? Now imagine that there is a very important bolt in an engine. Now, if I remove the bolt, this bolt, the engine falls off from the plane. Just imagine like that. Now, if I remove this bolt, now what happens is the engine fell down and the plane will crash. Now, when I took out the bolt off the chair, it did not affect the ecosystem in that much extent. It was barely noticeable. Whereas when I took out one bolt from the engine and the engine stopped and I crashed, and the entire plane, which is our entire ecosystem, let's say, crashed and we crumbled. So here he says that some of the bolts act like our keystone species. These significant bolts are very, very important to hold the ship, the ship of life or the ship of biodiversity that we have on our planet intact. So if this is broken, if these species are removed, then like the plane, sorry, and then like the plane will just fail, and then we cannot survive on this planet. So if you look at our Earth is just a blue marble floating in the infinite space. Okay, so we are just like a spaceship where our oceans are the very huge source for us to maintain our environment. Like as oxygen, it takes out a lot of carbon dioxide, it reflects a lot of sunlight, and it gives major source of rain. And then we have our land where we have all the organisms. Some give food, some consume, some die and decay, and some absorb this decay, and this cycle keeps on going. Now all of us are interdependent in this plane. It's like the huge earth is completely engineered to be a plane. Now if I pollute my oceans and if I kill all the organisms in the ocean, now what will happen? The oceans are major source for taking away 70% of your carbon dioxide and provide 80% of your oxygen. Now, if I take out the life in the oceans, now my spaceship will not have the air filtration system. You see, so that will fail. And I don't have my weather system where my I will have huge amounts of rainfall or no rainfall. So all these things will happen, and eventually, what will happen? This change in the climate and habitat loss will lead to huge destruction in biodiversity. Okay, so that is why the Rivett-Popper hypothesis explains so well about the keystone species or the key species that are important in our ecosystem and how we have to protect them. Did you guys understand these concepts, these two? Rivett-Popper hypothesis and then species area relationship? Yeah. So let's go next. So yeah. Next one is we have to talk about loss of biodiversity, and oh my god, this is so sad. Loss of biodiversity is a scary thought. Very simple. Why loss of biodiversity is a very scary thought? Can you imagine that you just die without knowing that? Uh, Imagine that you are there and suddenly you just disappear, and imagine that nobody knows that you are there or you are not there. What is the point of you? I mean, like, you're a life that was created and you are there, but we didn't know you were there and you just disappeared. So that means you never existed on the history. I know that it's very complicated to understand, but it's very simple if you just understand this concept. Imagine just not knowing an animal existed just because it went extinct due to human activity. We as a scientist, as a biologist, as a students of science, we have the curiosity to understand the richness or the library of life that is present on the planet. Now imagine that this library of life is burnt or killed and completely went extinct before even it is being introduced to the knowledge of human beings. So that is such a sad scenario. That is what is happening. Now IUCN, they have red listed so many organisms that are critically endangered. So they say that around 784 species, in that 338 vertebrates, 259 invertebrates, 87 plant species, they went extinct within the 500 years. Okay, oh, already extinct list. Okay, next one. Example, look at this. Dodo is so nice. And then we have Mamo, and then we have Tasmanian wolf, and then passenger pigeon. So all went extinct. Okay, next one. 27 species disappeared in the last 20 years. Okay, they didn't disappear, they went extinct. Okay, so you can't use the word disappeared. Disappeared is very soft. Okay, 15,500 species, they are facing the threat of extinction. 15,500 species. It's not one or two, 15,000 animals will never come back on this planet and they will go extinct. Next one, 12% of the birds, 23% of the mammals, 32% of the amphibians, and 31% of the gymnosperms, all of them are in the threat of extinction. Now, what are we saving? Like, what are we preserving? Is there any life that is left to preserve? Very little. Okay. Now, you can see that the rate of extinction is 100 to 1,000 times faster than the pre-human times. You don't understand this extinction thing, isn't it? There had been around 5 mass extinctions, okay, in the past. Even the dinosaurs, when they were there and they died, there was an extinction event. So in these extinction events, 5 of them has happened, and none of them is so fast. with the human activity, the extinction phase has increased to 1,000 times compared to that of any other past mass extinction event. Congratulations, human beings, you made it. Okay, so this is very dangerous. It's just like we are trying to dig our own grave. Okay, so we are more concerned about other things than conserving nature. So if this happens, what will happen? We will lose not half, 80% of the species. Here it is given half of the species on the earth might get extinct. So once it is done within the next, this is next 100 years, it's given in your textbook, but in 2030 it is estimated that 80% will go. Okay, by 2050 it will be very difficult for human beings to start adjusting to the life without life. That means we don't have biodiversity. We would have lost majority of the animals, and it is so hard for the human beings to. 2050 will be the year to start at the beginning of the end. Okay, so you know it's very shocking. Okay, so that is why we have to just preserve them. Now, when we look at the biodiversity and the conservation of biodiversity, students, major reason is we cannot let animals go extinct just because of human activities, and we don't even know that they have gone extinct or they were existing on this planet. So this library of life is very important to be studied, to be shared, and to be cherished from one generation to another generation. And we have to let them live and let live, such that the life continues peacefully on this planet. So next topic is we have to talk about loss of biodiversity. I think we don't have time. We do have time. Yeah, loss of biodiversity can we discuss in the next hour. We have only 4 minutes. Yes, can we discuss on Monday, people? Or you want me to do now? We don't have time. What am I supposed to understand? If you do thumbs up, yes or no? Can we stop? Yes, we'll stop. Chalo. In the next class, it will be finished. The chapter.